if I had to explain it, I'd say that Japanese are unhappy, they're feeling uneasy, and this party has come along with a very good online interface and glib answers, and people choosing it for that reason. I don't think it necessarily means that Japanese have turned xenophobic and nationalistic in an extreme way.
Let's move around and go to Japan. Right-wing populism has undoubtedly been rising in the West. It now seems to be establishing a foothold elsewhere. Japan's ruling Liberal Democratic Party lost its majority in the country's upper house in elections held yesterday. Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba has so far refused to resign, but his position is looking increasingly untenable. It came as a new Japan First party called Sanseito increased their seats from 2 to 15. Richard Lloyd Parry is the Asia editor for The Times and The Sunday Times, and he joins me now. Welcome to the show, Richard.
Hello from Tokyo.
Thanks so much for joining us. These are seismic results. Let's start first of all with the loss of a majority, because the Liberal Democratic Party, I think I'm right, has been in charge for something like 70 years, bar 3 years. It is basically almost a one-party state.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a one-party state because there are other parties and they have an equal chance to be elected. You know, the ballots aren't rigged, no one's being intimidated or anything like that. But yes, it's true except for 4 of the last 70 years, 2 separate occasions, Japanese have chosen the LDP. So this is a big thing. I mean, they now lack a majority in both the lower house, which is the important one. That's the house that passes laws and chooses the prime minister, but also the upper house as well. And during the times when the LDP's been in power, that's never happened before. So it's very bad for them.
And so what is going on in Japanese politics? Why is the LDP so unpopular, and why is there suddenly the rise of this Japan First party? And how significant is it? Is 15 seats significant?
Yeah, I mean, that is the question. 15 seats is pretty significant. I mean, before this election, they only had 2 seats. This is out of an upper house of 248 seats. So it's a big, big increase. And everyone's, trying to work out what it means. I mean, populist anti-immigrant parties are, of course, emerging and becoming stronger all over the world, and certainly in Europe, you might say also in North America. So that, in some ways, looks like the explanation. I don't think that's all there is to it. I mean, I went to a rally by Sanseito last week, and I must say, as kind of racist, ultranationalists go, these are very tepid, very nice, very friendly people. These are not far-right German skinheads or neo-Nazis of a kind that are familiar from Europe, say. I think, I could be proved wrong about this, but my sense of it is that a lot of this discontent is not really about foreigners, because Japan still has a very low number of resident foreigners. It's less than 3%. It's more a kind of way of expressing a deeper, perhaps less conscious discontent and disquiet about other, in many ways, more serious things. And that includes the economy. Prices are surging in Japan. The price of rice has doubled in a year. Donald Trump's tariffs are creating all kinds of uncertainty. There's arguments about taxation, there's no real consensus about what to do. So if I had to explain it, I'd say that Japanese are unhappy, they're feeling uneasy, and this party has come along with a very good online interface and glib answers, and people choosing it for that reason. I don't think it necessarily means that Japanese have turned xenophobic and nationalistic in an extreme way.
Yeah, no, it is absolutely fascinating. I mean, I absolutely hear what you say. I mean, Japan is famous for having very low levels of immigration. In fact, many people argue that Japan should have much larger immigration in order to grow its economy. It's a very kind of closed, in some ways still quite a closed society. And what is fascinating about what you said about the doubling of rice prices, for example, is, Japan has had 2 decades of effectively no growth. It's been famous for having these 2 lost decades, and it's just breaking out of that with price. But the kind of side effect of that is that prices are rising and so on. So this kind of transition out of its doldrum economy into a growing economy is causing problems rather than providing solutions.
Yeah, I mean, specifically, it's about inflation. I mean, Japan, for those 2 decades, really 25 years that you talk about, had deflation, which of course sounds fun. Prices go down, but it has a terribly strangling, stagnating effect on the economy because no one spends money. They're waiting for things to get cheaper all the time. So for a long time, the goal was controlled inflation. And that took a long time to achieve, was eventually achieved. But now in certain commodities, especially rice, it's got out of control. And the reasons are very complicated, not obvious, but it has a lot to do, I think, with bad policy. Historically, farmers were kind of paid not to grow rice because they wanted, to sustain prices for the traditional industry. So no one's really got on top of that yet. But it's an extraordinary thing for the price of a staple commodity to double in a year. I mean, in years past, 100 years ago, that would have been enough to prompt revolutions in some countries. Bread riots and things like that. And it hasn't got to that stage yet. But it does feel like a very unusual time in Japan, one that most people alive now haven't seen before.
I wonder how it will translate. I know what you say about this far-right party, as it were, not being perhaps what we would perceive as an extremist party in European terms. But Japan, of course, its post-war history is so interesting. It's had, obviously, historic clashes with its neighbours, China, South Korea. It's now effectively, America's strongest ally in the region. So you've got this destabilizing aspect of the Trump administration. Are you likely to see politicians in Japan calling for Japan to be more assertive in the region, which has traditionally not been its role, spending more on defence and asserting itself more strongly?
There are some politicians who are saying that. It's very complicated, as you've observed. I think part of the feeling of insecurity and disquiet I was talking about comes from anxiety about security. I mean, Japan is in a very difficult and unpredictable neighborhood, as you might call it. They've got North Korea over the water, and China, of course, is asserting itself in very aggressive ways with every passing month. And when Donald Trump came in and told the NATO allies, essentially, you've got to spend more on your defense or we may pull out of NATO, which is what he was doing, that was alarming. But those other NATO countries, European countries, still have one another. Japan really doesn't have anyone else in the region. Even South Korea, which is a advanced, sophisticated democracy like Japan, they have very difficult historical relations to do with the colonial period when Japan rather brutally ruled Korea. So Japan does feel very alone, and to stand up against Donald Trump and against the United States is a bolder and riskier thing to do than it is even for Keir Starmer or Emmanuel Macron. So there's a lot to think about there, and I think that's a debate that's going to unfold over time.
Brilliant. Well, Richard Lloyd Parry, Asia editor of the Times and Sunday Times, thank you for joining me to talk about the important elections that Japan has just had, where the Liberal Democrat Party, which is traditionally the party that holds power in Japan, has lost its majority, and also seen a new Japan First party called Sanseito significantly increase its seats from 2 to 15, albeit just 5% of the upper house, but nevertheless a significant progress.